Well, Tashina, thank you so much for being here with me on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm really excited that we're finally getting to do this. Oh my gosh, this has been a podcast episode in the making for so long, but I will not go down the detail. For the audience, we're finally doing this, and this is one of those episodes you've been waiting for. So, Tashina, before we get started with all the good stuff, why don't I hand over to you so you can introduce yourself to the audience and tell us what you do?
Thank you. Well, yes, I'm very glad to be here too. Just the reasons why is I had a baby and pregnancy and birth. So all of that's happened and has gone well, and we finally get to connect. So it's fantastic to be here and discuss all the wonderful things that we have about business and being a woman in business, male in business, all of it. So I am a confidence and mindset coach for small to medium-sized service-based entrepreneurs, and I love to support individuals bust through their limiting beliefs that are creating challenges and blocks within their business or in areas of their life that are then causing additional blocks in business, so that they can really step into what it is they feel called to do in the most whole way possible. So by working through those limiting beliefs, truly transforming them at a subconscious level is where we get to show up and be our best selves in life and in our businesses.
I know. And it's so powerful because I talk from experience, those are the things that we all struggle with. But I think once we have the technique and we kind of know what it is that we can do to get over those blocks, oh my gosh, it is just a completely different world on the other side. But before we get into that, and we're going to give you guys some great stuff here today, I want to hear from you, Tashina, a little bit about your story. How did you become a mindset and confidence coach? What is that kind of story for you, and where did that lead you to where you are now?
Sure. Well, the small version of the story is I love dancing. I came into this life wanting to dance professionally. Even at the age of 2.5, I begged my mom to put me into a dance class. And I was at a studio for about 10 to 11 years. And one woman, particularly the studio owner, had become a very close mentor and friend at that studio. And at the time that my parents were getting a divorce, we were letting the studio owner know I was no longer going to be able to attend that studio. And after my parents and I had had the conversation with her, my parents walked away, and I was left with the mentor. And she wagged her finger and got in my face and said, "You'll never amount to anything as a dancer." And at about 11 or 12 years old, it hurt when she said that. It hit me, but I didn't really know how deeply it had taken root in my body at a cellular level, an emotional level, mental level, all of it. And so fast forward, I joined a performing arts company after high school. I moved to California from Colorado to pursue a dance career. And I met challenge after challenge in that. Even though I had some fantastic experiences, I always felt blocked. Even though I could see what was possible in front of me, I never could reach it. It was always within reach, but just past. And then I transitioned into a form of partner dancing called West Coast Swing. And at this point, I literally danced my whole life. I was early 20s at this stage. And again, competitively, because you had to compete to then make it to the top professional level, all my mentors were saying, "You're well trained, you should be able to make finals in your competitions," and I wasn't. And I had moved my life again to California to pursue this dance dream of mine, a childhood dream. And again, I just couldn't break it, couldn't break past that glass wall that was in front of me. And it was upon a conversation that I actually had with my mom that I had this memory of that mentor at 12 years old telling me I would never amount to anything as a dancer. And it was like in a moment, a flash of clarity, my whole life made sense up until that point. Everything had been a reflection of the belief that I had really had about myself that I wouldn't amount to anything as a dancer. And it was just this, oh my gosh, moment of I've been creating this reality for myself, one that didn't serve me and one that I did not want to continue with. And so at the time, my mom was doing some clinical hypnotherapy. She was a hypnotherapist, as well as working in this other modality where you can work with the subconscious mind to shift and transform limiting beliefs. Excuse me. And that was the only thing I did different. I really just dove right in to Pandora's box of all the yuck and muck that was in between my two ears and in my heart that was disempowering. And things really drastically started to shift. Within about 2 to 3 months, I started making finals. And then 3 years later, to the event, my first dance event, I made the competitive top level finals. I placed in that competition. And since then, I went on to have a professional dance partner. I went on as an independent contractor. So I was my own business at that point, traveling internationally to teach, judge, compete, perform, mentor, coach. And so I kept showing up and doing the technical, physical training, but I also paired it with my mental training and the mental healing, the traumatic heart healing that had taken place, and started working with my beliefs about my success as a woman, my success as an independent contractor, you know, and how did that work with having a dance partner, another person in my business. And then the more conversations I had with dance students, literally all over the world, the same topics kept coming up: confidence, you know, self-worth, taking risks, creativity blocks. And it didn't matter what religion you were, what ethnicity you were, what background you were, all of us have to sort through the limiting beliefs that we were raised with as a child into adulthood. And so I started pairing my mindset work that I had done with myself and that I had then at that point trained to do with other individuals, with the clients or the students I was working with internationally. And when I then first had my first son and the pandemic, you know, multiple things I think for most of us shifted, but I really went full time into doing the mindset work with entrepreneurs and artists. So that is a little bit condensed version of my background and how I came to be where I'm at today.
Oh my God, it's absolutely fascinating to hear it. And you know what? It just shows that the importance of, once you have those blocks shifted or moved, or you start working on them and you completely change your behavior around your thinking, anything is possible. And it is so powerful, because I can only talk for myself, because I've experienced it as well, you know, going from a very low depth, struggling in my business, to just realizing I need to do something. I need to shift the way I'm thinking, clearing those blocks out. And then as soon as I did, it's like you said, almost instantaneously, within a couple of weeks, a couple of months, things just started shifting in an incredible amount of ways. And they've just been going up and up and up and up. And I can see that in your story as well, which is why I'm so glad you shared that, because for everybody listening here, anything is possible, but it's got to start with you, not just the physical aspect of what you're doing, whatever action you're taking, whether in your business, whether you want to achieve something, whether you're working towards something. It starts with those limiting beliefs, those blocks that you need to clear out first. And it is a work in progress. It doesn't happen overnight. But this is what we're going to talk about today. And I think this is what makes it so powerful, and why I'm so excited about doing this episode, because everybody has got blocks, whether you admit it or not. You're going to want to work through them. So let's dive right in. We want to talk about the 5 mindset blocks that is stopping us from achieving anything. And this is whether you're in business, whether you're starting a business, whether you're employed, whether you're just a mum, it doesn't matter. Whatever your situation, these are the 5 most common blocks that we find. Personally, myself, seen it with my clients. I'm sure you've seen these as well. And we touched upon these before we started the recording. And I think, you know, this is going to be really, 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 how can I say, sumptuous for people just to kind of take in and see, this is what I'm going through. This is what I need to do to kind of fix it in a way. So let's start off with the first, I would say, kind of mindset block regarding anything that we're doing. And this is where perfectionism comes in, and procrastination. And they talk about the evil twins here, basically, because they walk very much hand in hand. From your experience, how would you explain perfectionism and procrastination to the audience? And do you kind of have an example from your own experience towards that?
Yes, absolutely. So for me and the clients that I've worked with, perfectionism is this expectation that we either place on ourselves or that we perceive has been placed on us by an individual, by a family, by a company to reach a level of consistent performance in whatever it is. And there's so much pressure that builds up to consistently meet this expectation that it's draining and it keeps us from showing up fully, maybe taking risks, maybe speaking up in that office meeting or speaking up to a creative idea that you would like to explore in your business or your company, whatever it is. Or the procrastination side of it, of, this expectation of perfection is around you, in some capacity, and you're concerned or fear failing meeting that expectation. So you don't take the steps needed to perform the task to reach the end goal that is looking to be reached. And so for me personally, and my individual story, perfectionism was a huge thing that I've had to work through. And there's still layers of it that I, face once in a while. But for me, it showed up in my dancing. I'm a very technical dancer. So ballet, I really like the black and white, the do's, the don'ts. And this idea of this beautiful, perfect dancer on stage was really plastered in my mind very concretely. And in the form that I transitioned to, West Coast Swing, it's all improvisational, where there's a base technique, but then it leaves room for a lot of creative voice and expression. And a big reason that I was having a hard time making those finals at the very beginning when I was sharing my story was because I was so concerned that I wouldn't look perfect in my competitions, that I wasn't taking the risk and the opportunity to put who I was into the dance. And in that form of dance that I do, that's really what is needed to excel. But I was so afraid of not being perfect that it made me procrastinate. I was self-sabotaging. I was procrastinating, putting my ideas, my voice into the dance. And when I finally was able to work through a large chunk of that perfectionism, that's when I really started to see a lot more results in my outer world, because I was taking the risk of putting myself out there, even though it wasn't the perfect arm line or even though it wasn't the perfect technique. And I found that for myself in business as well, like in a website. There's been times where I feel like I have to have everything perfect on the website, the landing page, the opt-in, the freebie, like whatever it is that I'm doing, but I have to remind myself to take imperfect action. Mm-hmm. And that by putting myself out there at a stage when it is at least ready to, in business, receive the flow of clients or whatever it might be, that I can then adapt things as I'm learning and seeing how it works. So for me, the concept of taking imperfect action was a huge, huge thing for me to embrace and then integrate into my daily practice.
Yes. And I can so agree with everything that you've just said, because that is something that I kind of faced in the beginning as well with my business. Is I felt that everything had to be perfect before I launched. Everything had to be perfect before I put it out there. Because again, this is a little bit where we kind of feel that, oh my gosh, people are going to see this. They are going to have an interpretation of who you are and what you're doing. If if they find a mistake, oh my gosh, the whole world would come crashing down if you made a typing error or there's a spelling mistake. And I think it's one of those things that the saying goes, done is better than perfect. But at the end of the day, I think if you feel that you've given every effort and do it and just go for it, that's also going to be okay. But you've got to make peace with yourself in that perfectionism stage. And like you say, there's so many layers of it. We're all still working through it. Just the other night, we decided there was a networking event, and a bunch of ladies, own all our businesses. We decided to get together, and there was this thing where we arranged, we're going to go painting, speed painting for one night. And we had to follow this guy painting these things. And everybody was like, this is not good for perfectionists, because he's just telling you what to do and you've got to follow, and you can't be perfect and start painting the tiniest little things. And that was a big learning curve for me there, because I was like, yeah, I can do this. I'm fine. I'm creative. I can do this. And as I started going, I was like, I am such a perfectionist. And then when the time limit came on, it's like, you've got 10 minutes left, ladies. All that perfection went out of the window for every single one of us. And we were like, we've got to finish this. No, let's not worry about going over the lines and stuff. And I think that was a big learning curve again, to realize that, hey, there are some layers of perfectionism you've got to work on and get over with. And it was such an amazing kind of experience to learn again, to let go of perfectionism, and also procrastination, because you're sitting there looking at this thing going, I can't do this. Or maybe I should do it like this. Maybe you should do it like this. Just do it. And it was just such a great experience. But I think for each and every one of us, there is something that we've got to work through. And this would actually lead me to a question for you in particular. What is the one tip that you can give people here right now to help them get over that perfectionism or procrastination even?
If I may, I'm going to give two.
By all means, yes, please. The more the merrier.
An outward practice, I think, is what you just said. Finding activities that require you to show up and do versus plan ahead and give you the time to procrastinate. Find activities like the speed painting, like potting a plant, even as silly as that may sound. You know, it's okay if it's crooked at first, or rearranging a room, whatever it may be. Find small practices that require you to show up and do, and have it be okay. Practice being imperfect. As you're doing those practices of being imperfect, then the second tip would be internally registering what it is that you're hearing in your head, or what are you feeling in your heart as those things are being done. No one's going to appreciate this. A root one, it may not show up as this statement, but I won't be loved if this isn't perfect. That more or less in different wording is what shows up for a lot of clients.
Yeah.
The belief and the feeling, the thought that if this isn't perfect, I as a human am not lovable, or I'm not worthy, or I'm not deserving. That tends to be at the root cause of a lot of perfectionism.
Yeah,
whether it
that's
was
very interesting.
Whether it was instilled from school, whether it was instilled from parents or grandparents, or the perceived idea of perfection from social media. You know, I won't be successful, I won't be seen unless XYZ is perfect. So once you start paying attention to what it is that is coming up as you're practicing the imperfection pieces, that's really where you want to, I encourage you to hone in on and write those down, because that is what's driving your boat, your ship.
Yes. 100.
That is the core crux of what needs to be shifted and transformed in order for you to truly embrace being imperfect in whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think this kind of beautifully leads into the second block as well, which is the fear of success, or even the fear of failure for most people. You know, there's the two polarities to it. And again, from your point of view, how would you describe the fear of success or fear of failure? And do you have an example of that?
Sure. I'll use an example of one of my clients, a dancer. I've worked a lot with dancers, so a lot of my examples are in that realm. She knew she needed to be practicing so that when she showed up to her competitions, she could do well, because her ultimate goal was to be an instructor in her local area. And she initially came to me with the challenge of not practicing consistently. She was procrastinating, and she really wanted to work through that. And what ended up coming up as the core bottom cause of her not showing up to her own practices was she was so afraid of being seen.
Ah, interesting.
She was so afraid of being seen, because if she was seen, she knew she would be successful. So for her, where it was wrapped up in was being visible. She wanted to be successful, Truly, she did, but she was so afraid of being seen and judged by others around her. So she was sabotaging her success, which then showed up as her not being accountable to her own practices that she had set forth in her diary, her calendar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, it will be different for every single person and to the degree of which it shows up for you. But I always like to encourage, so this would be a tip that any person could do, is a if what, or if then scenario. If I put out an imperfect TikTok video or an imperfect Instagram reel, what would happen? Okay, if that scenario happened, then what would happen? Okay, it goes viral. If it goes viral, then I get an influx of clients. If I get an influx of clients, I'm never going to have enough time with my kids or my family, and I'll be a failed mother or a failed wife. So it may not be the fear of failing in business. Maybe it's a fear of failing as a parent, or a fear of succeeding because XYZ would then have to occur in life. A belief
Yes.
of you can have success in business, but you'll fail as a family member, right? So where are those dichotomies landing for you, or for anyone listening? You know, I like to do a if what, or if this happens, then what will occur? And that tends to also shed a lot of light on the deeper rooted fear, not so much the initial thing that may be showing up for you.
Yeah. Actually, that's very interesting, because I like those steps that you said, the if, what, then. Because it does shine light on, you know, what's the worst that could happen, basically, or what is the best case scenario, and then what thereafter. I really like that kind of scenario if you were to play that out, because I think it's like everything, you know, we don't know what the future holds, and that unknown is also the driving factor of, you know, do we strive for success even though we want it, or we want success, but what if we fail? But if you kind of look at that if, what, when, it kind of gives you a better indication of, well, you know, if this happens, I think I can handle it. And you kind of make a plan for it and get ready for it, so to speak. And hey, and if the worst case scenario happens, let's make a plan for that, so that when it does happen, at least I've got a plan B. So I think that kind of just helps you with a little bit more clarity in a way to kind of see and put something in place so that you have something to fall back on in case that fear of failure or fear of success comes up. You go, it's not so bad. I've got a plan B. I know what I need to do. So excellent tip. Thank you so much for that. Let's talk about the third block. Oh gosh, this is a big one for so many people, imposter syndrome. And we know imposter syndrome is one of those big things. A lot of people talk about it. It comes in different sizes, in different shapes, all over the place. But what is your take on imposter syndrome? And do you have an example as well of that one?
Sure. For me personally, it was when I started teaching dance, because there were other professionals that had been teaching for many more years in the style of dance than I did. And so I felt like an imposter charging money as a business owner, teaching dance when there were people that had a lot more experience in the style and had a lot more technique that they could offer. So I felt like an imposter showing up and charging. But what I really had to learn for myself is I had my own experiences, my own background that brought a lot to a person that chose to come and invest their time, money, and energy with me. And that had value. That was valuable. Not just, again, the technique portion of it, but me as a human, as a person, I brought value. And that isn't an imposter. So as long as I feel like in dance and in business, as long as you show up and you teach, you coach, you whatever it is that your role is in your business, in whatever family role that you have, as long as you show up and you're you, 100% you, and you're sharing from your experience, your wisdom, your process, your approach to things, you cannot be an imposter.
Yes.
And I've even said that to students. There's going to be lots of opportunities for you to go take and experience other approaches to this style of dance, or there's going to be lots of other ways that you can go and work through your mindset. this is what I found that works best for me and for the clients that I've worked with. And I'm here to help and support you with this approach and with my experiences. Let's go for it. And so if you show up in business in that way or in your family in that way, you cannot be an imposter. And that really helped me to ground into my own confidence about where I came from, what I learned from my own experiences, and how can I then show up and help others who might be navigating similar or the same.
Exactly. And, you know, I love your example because I've heard so many other people say this to me as well, is, you know, let's start first with this kind of part where they compare themselves to other people. And when they start comparing themselves, they feel like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. And then they start questioning their own abilities. And then they start comparing themselves to what other people are doing, but not always realizing that the moment in time where you're in your life now is completely different from the stages that that person you're comparing yourself to is in their stage of their business, of their life, whatever that might be. So maybe they were already experiencing what you're experiencing now, but that was some time ago. They've worked through that and they're already on a different level. You've got to work your own way up to that level, but you've got to do it your own way, exactly like you said. Everybody's unique. I mean, you've got your own way of thinking, of smiling, of doing things. I've got my own way of thinking, of smiling, of doing things. And even if I was a dancing instructor, we would still have unique businesses because of who we are as individuals. So I agree with you that imposter syndrome, I kind of wonder if it's just a thing made up to kind of describe it, but it doesn't really exist because you are not an imposter to yourself as long as you're authentic to yourself and the way you show up for
Oftentimes
others.
that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges is taking the time to get to know who you are and taking the time to get to embodying your imperfections and being okay with sharing those with other people and whatever it is that you're doing, because those other people are also imperfect. And they, most of the times, are wanting someone that understands that gets that's okay to be real with it. And so, you know, I've said this to other clients, my mindset clients that are not dancers. You know what? The thing that you're working through right now is actually something that I've been feeling at the edge of my comfort zone that I'm also working through right now.
Yeah.
You know, just because you're a coach doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out. If you're in the coaching realm, it just means you're like 1 or 2 steps ahead of another person, and you can again share what you've been through.
Exactly. No,
But
I love that.
Opportunity of getting to know yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a hard thing, especially in the world that we live in today, where there's so much social media presence. You know, we get so bombarded with external things on a daily basis through media. And it kind of dictates on a daily basis as to how we need to show up and what we need to think and how we need to feel, rather than just tapping into ourselves a little bit more. It's like, who are you really? How can you control how you feel? What is it that you need to do? How can you show up authentically? And I find that a lot of people still struggle with that because they rely on the external sources to tell them what they need to do, how they need to think, and how they need to show up. Whereby if you really tap into your own kind of resources as to who you are, you will find that actually it is a lot more comfortable to just be authentic, regardless of what's being said around you, and just to go for it. I mean, if it sits and it feels right for you, then go for it. That's what I say, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about the fourth one, overwhelm. This is something I come across a lot as a business coach, and this is a deep topic, but I want to keep this here as a general block as well, because I do find when it comes to overwhelm, it kind of gets people, and it kind of ties in with procrastination again as well a little bit, but that overwhelm that we kind of have, how can I say this nicely? Do we make it up? You tell me, what is your experience from that?
Oh man. I mean, we are in a culture and a society that loves busyness and doingness and loves having this never-ending to-do list that can never seem to get completed. And I love lists. So I have I'm speaking from experience. I understand what it's like to have this long list and feel like you're never getting it done or staying on top of things. But what has really been helpful for me in my business is prioritizing the top 3 things that make the biggest impact.
Yeah.
If we're talking about doing something on a daily basis. Because there's always going to be the extra busy stuff that you could do, again, to reach this perceived idea of being the perfect business owner, being the perfect mom, having the whole list completed and going to bed at night going, oh, I did it all, I'm perfect. Likely that's not going to happen. But if you really drill down to whatever is on that list, going, what's going to provide, I like to ask these questions myself. What's going to provide me the most joy?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to provide the most impact? And what's going to fill my cup, like re-energize me so I can keep showing up?
Yes.
And maybe 3 to 4 things a day. And for me, this is Tashina speaking, if I personally do that and I get those 3 things, even if I don't complete each 3 things, I know I at least showed up in a way that was meaningful to me.
Yes.
And whatever it is that I did that day.
Yeah.
And it's taken a lot for me. And I worked with another client on this topic in Germany, who at her job, she felt like she had to get through all of her emails that were unread by the end of the day in order to feel like she could show up to work the next day and be her best self. And she was staying up until 3, 4 a.m., sabotaging her sleep and her health, her mental well-being, her focus the next day at work because she had this pressure that she herself placed on herself, right? And so when we got to a place of discussing this and then working with the subconscious beliefs that I am still valuable at my job, regardless of how many emails, she was able to then turn the computer off, honor the boundaries of time that she had set. I'm going to turn my computer off at 5 or 6 p.m., whatever it was. I'm not taking my laptop with me on work trips. These are the hours I show up in my job that I've agreed to, my contractor, my employer has agreed to, and outside of that, I'm going to take care of myself. Regardless of what other emails or to-do list items are there, I'm going to be at peace. I'm still valuable, even though the stuff is there. And that really has made a huge impact for her in that specific scenario. So the overwhelm I think, comes to being at peace with the busyness that's always going to exist.
And you said something very valuable there. The overwhelm is something we put on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people externally are not putting it on you, is because, again, like I said, it leads with procrastination and perfectionism hand in hand. But it's that kind of thing you're putting on yourself. I have to do this. I've got to complete this. I've got to finish this. And I've got to do this and this and this and this and this and this. And like you said, that to-do list just goes crazy. From my own experience, I don't do to-do lists. Okay. It's just something I used to have so many post-it notes all over my computer at one point with all the to-do lists. It honestly just started looking like a Christmas tree. I just needed the fairy lights. But it was just crazy. And I just, you know, that kind of satisfaction of, doing one thing, taking the post-it, binning it. And then before I knew it, I replaced that kind of empty spot with 2 more post-it notes. So one day I just started that I removed all of that post-it notes, binned it all, didn't even put it on the to-do list. And I just started focusing on what it is that I needed to do, you know, per week. What is this one thing that I need to concentrate on doing and finish and complete this one week? And then I broke it up into 5 days and say, okay, well, if I do a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, I can complete this thing. And then I started making the task a little bit bigger and say, okay, for this month, what is this one big task I need to complete? And then I broke it down. And it was such a huge relief for me personally, because I can't do to-do lists. Mm-hmm. And then funny enough, a couple of months ago, I was like, there's a lot of things going on in my mind. I need to capture it. Before I knew it, I started writing all of these things down, creating a to-do list for myself again, getting overwhelmed, going, I've only done 3 things on this to-do list. There's so much I still need to do. And I was like, nope, I've just backtracked again. I've gone back to doing a to-do list. I tore that piece of paper out, threw it in the bin. I was like, what is it that I normally do that's giving me that peace and calm? And I was like, concentrate again, 1 week at a time. What is that main task? And I started doing that again. And you know what? It is such a relief.
Yeah.
But again, this is me. I'm talking only for myself. I know it won't work for everybody. So I guess everybody's just got to find out what is that thing that they can do. And I would say kind of move away from the to-do list, wouldn't you? What would you say, being a to-do list lady?
Logistically, again, there's going to be things that definitely need to get done, like
Yes.
grocery shopping or, making the bed, doing laundry. Like there's going to be things to
Of
do
course.
always. But what I've found with myself and with a lot of clients is, again, it'll be different wording per person, but the general theme is my value, my worth comes from who I am. That tends to be the crux of what the person feels they're lacking,
Yes.
because they tend to find or feel and believe that their worth and value, their enoughness, comes from what they produce, what they do. And I think that's why we tend to create this to-do list, all these things that need to be completed, is because we're trying to prove to ourselves or to someone else that we are enough. And if we just complete all the things, if we produce all the things, then we're going to prove that we're enough. And that will be instilled, if that is true for those of you that are listening, that'll be instilled in various ways from our upbringing. Whereas if we can, as an individual, step into the place of knowing and truly believing at a subconscious level, which is really where we have to work with our beliefs, not just the conscious level, but at the subconscious level, that we are enough by who we are and how we show up, not by what we do and produce. That really tends to change and transform a person's ability to cope with the perceived overwhelm, the perceived do and busyness of life that surrounds us.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't have said that better myself. That just encapsulated that whole thing. And I love how you just brought that kind of tip in there. It is, you've got to figure out what is that thing that you feel you're not good enough with in order to justify why I'm doing all of these things to make myself feel better or make myself feel enough. And I think it's like you say, on a subconscious level, if you work through one of those things that have kind of brought that on in the beginning, you will very quickly see that, once you eliminate that, once you work through that, everything else starts changing. And it's like you said, simple example. You were 12 years old, you got told that you will never be good enough as a dancer, you will never get to anything with that kind of career or that kind of route. And subconsciously that instilled a belief. And you just had to work through that belief, and then everything changed within a couple of months. And it's the same principle here, with a to-do list, with the overwhelm that you're creating for yourself. The last thing that I want to talk about very much is the I kind of don't know how to put this into another aspect, but I, again, work with so many women who's got this block whereby they feel they can't think clearly. They can't make decisions. It's almost like their thinking is a little bit clouded. And then I find that as soon as we get clarity as to what it is that they need to do, or what are the steps that I need to take, or what is the strategy, or all of those kind of things, they just immediately feel that their confidence is boosted at the same time. But that kind of clouded way of thinking of, what do I need to do? How do I do it? That's also kind of like a block where we kind of stagger around almost in the dark. From your kind of perception and your kind of experience, what would you share with the audience regarding that block?
What's been a huge help for me, and a really big impactful question that my clients, that I encourage them to ask for themselves, is what's going to bring me the most joy? Not the right path or the wrong path, but what's going to bring me the most joy? Because I believe and have experienced for myself that when we step into a direction in life that brings us joy, we show up differently. Rather than stepping into a path that is going to bring the most money, is going to get me the highest title in the company possible. Those are all outside things
Yeah.
that will eventually dry up, if you will. The satisfaction from having those things will dry up. Versus, I think when we step into a direction and a path that brings us joy, it's this renewable source of energy that gives us the ability to show up on the days that are going to be harder, that gives us the ability to fully commit to whatever it is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are all of these different forks in the road in front of a person, stepping back, and on paper, at least, this is for me how I do it, is I step into each fork in the road and go, what would my life be like if I embrace this path? How much joy would it bring me? And I usually give it a joy rating, a joy scale. So on a 1 to 10, 10 being an immense amount of joy, where does that show up for me?
Yeah.
And then I'll step back and I'll go into this other path and do the same experiences. How would it allow me to show up for my family? How would it show up in free time, and my creativity, and my comfortability taking risks? Okay, joy number 8, that feels pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna come back, I'm gonna go down this route. Well, that one only feels like a 4. Okay, that probably isn't gonna be a path that serves me in its fullness, at least at this point in life. Maybe I'll come back to that in a few years. So for me, that's where I tend to encourage clients to step into, is consider what the lifestyle would be like on a daily basis and then long term, and the amount of joy that each one would bring. And then making a decision based off of that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the joy scale. I think it kind of helps with that clarity to kind of which direction you need to go in. So I love the fact that you're bringing that in, and I think I'm going to use that myself from now on. Please a little bit as well. But no, it is such a nice way to look at it. And I do agree with you 100%, you know, making a decision based on what is going to give you or bring you the most joy. And this is where I kind of talk about your intuition or your gut. You know, listen to what your gut and your intuition is sharing. Whatever gets you the most excited, whatever gets you really crazy, joyness, you know, all of that stuff. That's your guidance system, your intuition telling you that's the direction you need to go in. But I love the fact that you're putting a scale onto it as well, because I am going to start doing that now as well. So I think it's a great tip there. But yeah, you know, what I just love about this whole conversation we've had today is each one of these 5 blocks that we've mentioned, everybody has got a sense or a level of what they're experiencing with each one of these blocks. And I love your intake on it about, you know, based on your examples as well, but the tips that you've shared with everybody here in order to kind of just bulldozer through it, just work through it. And for those of you listening, this is the one thing I said in the beginning. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay, this is something you've got to work on. But as soon as you start tapping into those subconscious levels and working through these things, exactly like Tashina said, within a matter of weeks and months, things can dramatically change for you. And I think this is what makes it so powerful. I've experienced it myself. Tashina has just shared her story as to how she experienced it. And you can do this too. So if you're stuck at a point in your business or in a point in your life right now, you don't know where to go and you can't see what it could be like or what it could or should be like for you, then start looking at these 5 main blocks and just start working through them one at a time. And I promise you, you're already going to see a huge difference. And on top of that, Tashina's got something that's going to help you, in particular with perfectionism. So Tashina, you've got an amazing freebie available here for the audience to help them with that perfectionism. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, it's a freebie, How to Break the Perfectionist Mindset Kit, where a workbook is included and a course, a total of about 45 minutes in video coaching is what it ends up being, on really diving into this concept of perfectionism, how it's showing up in your life, why it's showing up in your life, and what action steps you can start implementing immediately to move the needle on breaking through perfectionism in any area of your life. And so it's an online download that you can access, and it's at empowered2greatness.com/perfectionist kit. And are you able to include the link for them?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll have the link in the show notes, so it will definitely be there.
Yeah, but I really encourage anyone listening, if you're struggling with perfectionism, it's okay. You're not alone. Every single person I've encountered, myself included, are working through layers and levels of perfectionism. And just like you said, start working with it little bit by little bit. Continue to show up for yourself. My freebie is a great way to start working with it. And I would love to support anyone that is needing additional help in navigating, especially the subconscious aspects of the perfectionism.
Absolutely. And I can highly recommend Tashina as well, because like I said, I've experienced it myself, and knowing that I've worked through that and I had an expert to help me work through the subconscious blocks, basically, it made a huge difference. So if you just want to start off with the perfectionism mindset kit, by all means, the link is below in the show notes. You can go and download that now. And if you want to take a step further and maybe get in contact with Tashina to talk a little bit more about how she can help you, I would highly recommend you do it. Okay, maybe you've tried so many other things in the past and you just feel like you're banging your head against the wall and you do not know what else you need to do. Maybe this is it. This is just that one thing you've been looking for to help you break through that subconscious barrier and really go for whatever it is that you've always wanted. So you can connect with Tashina. Her website link will also be in the show notes, including Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So whichever way you want, please get in contact with her, and I'm sure she'd be more than happy to have a chat with you. Tashina, thank you so much again. I'm so glad we managed to do this episode, and I really appreciate all your insight and value. It's been amazing, and thank you so much for being the person who you are and just helping those around you. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everybody else do as well.
Thanks for this opportunity and for you showing up and having this platform as well.